I'm Leigh Brown, and this is Crazy Shit in Real Estate. Today, I have a conversation for you that's going to go in all the directions. I think you're really going to enjoy it because I did. And I get to introduce you to my new friend, Erin Hatzikostas. She's going to talk to you a little bit about a dad in real estate, her personal stories, and just going to leave you literally feeling like you made a new friend. Enjoy the conversation. I'll see you on the other side. Welcome to my show. I'm so excited to have you on here.
I'm excited too. And make sure you ask me about my crazy shit story in real estate because I've got one for you from
That's
Dad.
Perfect because you get to talk about Dad and you, and we have to call him a serial storyteller thief because he's a storyteller thief in my head anyway.
I told you that.
I feel like that's his book. It could be his memoir, and the end of it could be a full which one was really Dad's story and which one did he lift from somebody else.
I love it. That's
like
hilarious.
Choose Your Own Adventure.
Yeah, I love that.
I love Choose Your Own Adventures. All right, so tell my audience how to pronounce your name, where you're located. Give them a little thumbnail sketch of Erin.
Yeah, Erin Hatzikostas is the American way to say it. Erin Hatzikostas is if you're sort of Mediterranean, Greek.
I'll do that again. The hand goes with that.
Hatzikostas. I married a Greek. My maiden name is Davis. I'm from northern Michigan. I'm as white Anglo-Saxon as they come, but I have now this very sort of ethnic name. I live now in Connecticut, but I'm always from Michigan. So I'm always that small town girl, not a little bit naive, a little bit bold from northern Michigan. Now I'm out in Connecticut. Been here for 28 years, doing a bunch of crazy things.
So you know what I think of when you talk about being the girl from Michigan? There was an interview that Tucker Carlson did with Kid Rock, I think. He was interviewing Kid Rock, and Tucker's married to a girl from either Wisconsin or Michigan, and the crowd is like on fire because she's their girl. Like, if you don't know anything about it, she's ours. It was the coolest.
If you meet, I will tell you, if you meet somebody from Michigan, so for example, Molly Fletcher, I don't know if you know Molly or who she is. She's a speaker, pretty well known. We met about 3 years ago in a group, kind of like you and I met, like Impact 11, sort of a mastermind. And it was hilarious. We're all at a table. And they purposely sat us next together because they knew we'd really get along. Well, the opening exercise was, introduce yourself, what's your brand or something, and where are you from? And we were literally the last two. So they go around the table, and then Molly goes and she says, I live in Atlanta, but I'm from Michigan. And at that very moment, like the seas parted. Everyone from our table was totally irrelevant. They went and she and I just locked in. There is something special about Midwest bond, but definitely when I meet people from Michigan, it's just, an immediate sort of connection.
Yeah, I love my fellow North Carolinians, but we don't It's hilariously interesting about Michigan and Wisconsin. And I've never noticed it in other states. I lived in Iowa for a while and nobody really brags about being from Iowa. They're just kind of like, oh, I'm so sorry. I mean, it's kind of a thing, but all right. So I also have to ask you the question that I know is going to be in the comments when we post this episode, because I know my followers and my viewers. Did you have my big fat Greek wedding?
It's so funny. I just had a speaker bureau agent I'm working with ask me the same thing yesterday. Like, is it really like big fat Greek? So yes and no, but more importantly, I had a big fat Greek baptism. So,
like Greek Orthodox?
Yes. So to get married in the Greek Orthodox Church, you do not have to be baptized Greek Orthodox, but you have to be a baptized Christian. Now, I grew up in northern Michigan. We just weren't a religious family. I was never baptized. And so when I had to make a choice, and my parents were like, come back home. We'll take you to the Baptist church that you used to follow your friends to and go to Bible school every, week. But I knew, Manny and I would probably have a family. My kids would probably become Greek. Why not go? And I've been going to the church for years with him, right? So at 30 years old, Leigh, I decided to get baptized. And I am not shitting you. Can I swear?
Oh, the only word we don't say is see you next Tuesday, because I think it's ugly.
Oh, I don't say that word.
Because that makes God really mad. But other than that, you get to talk how you...
All right. So I got baptized. Picture this. Because it's very ceremonial. If you know, and you know the weddings. Well, the baptisms are just as ceremonial, and so you start.
They're beautiful.
You start in a regular dress. Picture this. Usually, you're like 6 months old. Then you change, usually just right in front of the church. But I had to leave the church, go down, up the stairs, down the hallway, into the bathroom, and change into my Speedo bathing suit because I was not going to wear my bikini, so I got out my swimming bathing suit, come all the way down the hallway, down the stairs, back into the front of the church. Now, I was too small to be dunked into, the regular sort of basin or whatever the heck they call it. They had instead got an impromptu plastic tub that I am pretty sure came from Home Depot and might be used to make like cement stairs outside of homes, like formed stairs. And they put me in it. And then part of the ceremony, then they take olive oil, and your godfather, who was my husband's uncle, so we're both grown people, stood next to each other. And I had to say, I will to a bunch of things I didn't understand. So I always joke, I may be married to George as well. And then they put olive oil all over me, including the bottom of my feet. And then they said to me, be careful, it might be slippery. Well, no shit, it might be slippery. Water, plastic, and olive oil. So yeah, so I'm in this tub. And so the best part of it is it was on a Monday night, not during regular church. And about 3 days before, my closest friends knew I was going to get baptized. And they said, can we come? I said, no. It's not like this is just his closest fan. So finally I gave in. I said, okay. So Nicole, who's my podcast co-host, my friend Sherry and Jen. Well, my friend Sherry had Maddie at the time. She was the only one that had a baby. She was 6 months old. So I'm in the tub, super vulnerable. All of a sudden I hear my friends start cracking up. And I'm like, those mofos, like, how dare I let them come? And now they're going to laugh. And come to find out, the reason they were laughing is little Maddie, a 6-month-old laddie, all of a sudden just started cracking up. So they were laughing at her. But anyway, and then got done, went all the way back to the bathroom, got in my white dress, came back. And so, yes, I sort of had a big fat Greek wedding. We only had about 175 people, but I have many, many, many my big fat Greek family stories.
So I just think your background should have a bottle of Windex on it. I just don't, what's wrong with your podcast back there? Put it right behind you, do you? Because it's a very own brand with your story of authenticity. I mean,
that's a great, I could dedicate a whole cube. So I've got the cubes to like the Greek
oil.
I could have the beads, the eye, all the stuff.
I mean, why not? And Manny would look at that and say, seriously? And you would say, yes.
It's an ode. It's an homage, I should say. It's an homage.
Oh, okay. So on our show, we talk about all things real estate. And I got so excited when you mentioned absolutely in passing a dad in real estate.
Yeah.
And there is this interesting progression that happens in real estate we talk about preachers' kids, call them PKs, and we don't expect a PK to act well. Then you talk about realtor kids who never want to be realtors because they've observed real estate life forever. And you're one of the very few who broke the mold, and you did not go into real estate. You didn't get sucked into it like so many of us did. I'd love to hear your story of being the child of a realtor, what you experienced and what it looked like from your perspective.
Yeah, so my road is a little different because I was the one that actually suggested my father become a realtor. So my father was a high school teacher. He taught woodworking and shop. He was the AD. He taught at a school where most classes had about 58 kids in it. So he was the athletic director. He was a math teacher. He kind of did it all. I think he was assistant principal at one point. And he was a phenomenal teacher. And he used to come home every night. And most people would come home from work, your parents, right, and bitch and moan about whether, especially a teacher, the kid that acted up or the teacher that ticked you off. And instead, my dad would come home almost every night. He'd have his one beer while my mom was cooking dinner. She taught as well, but closer. She always was home first. And he would tell story after story. And the stories were not your typical stories. They were like, I had problems with the kids listening in class over the last few weeks. So I decided today to come in. I put down a tape recorder and I hit play. And I wrote before I did that, I wrote on the board, I'm a blank, I'm a blank, I'm a blank. Hit the tape recorder and walked out the room, said nothing. And the kids, of course, were like, what the hell is Mr. Davis doing? What's going on? And all of a sudden, what comes on? James Taylor. Well, I'm a steamroller, baby, right? I'm gonna walk all over you. Well, his point was he was having so much trouble with them listening Normal course would be to discipline, to yell, to punish. Instead, he wanted to demonstrate. And so the I'm a blank was they had to fill in. I'm a steamroller. I'm a napalm bomb, right? Like they had to listen to the song and figure out all the things that James Taylor said. And so those stories were nonstop, Leigh, like of the things, the unique, authentic things he did. And of course, I mean, students loved him. They still write him on Facebook, which is hilarious because his students are now, some of his students are like 50 some years old, right? My dad's 75. And so we'll come back to that. That was, sort of my beginning of watching authenticity and not really realizing and seeing the impact. So then what happened was when he was 40, I think he was 48, they offered an early retirement package. They were having financial difficulties. And the summer or two before that, I had worked at a real estate agency as just, an administrative person on my summer break in town, in our small little town. And I remember, doing all the things, and I wasn't paying that much attention to the real estate because I wasn't thinking I was going into that. I was just doing the admin. But I remember thinking and kind of watching, observing, and I was like, my dad should do this. Like as his, whether it's a side gig or his retirement job, like he would be so good at this because I saw how important, right? Obviously relationships were, and he was so good at that. So sure enough, I think the next year, before he retired, he decided to sort of test it out, get his license, start on it. And then the early retirement package came in. And so my father became a realtor, let's call it late 40s, all the way till I think he finally gave away the rest of his business to a good friend of ours, family friend, great guy, maybe 2 years ago. And so I had a little bit different path. I actually sort of was a grown adult and was the one that told him to check it out.
Well, you recruited him into the space where so many people come into this because the average age is 56 in real estate. It's a second, third career.
Yep.
I'm now established enough. I now have a bank account so I can test out this commission world. And most people flare out because they find out it's very expensive, it's very time consuming and very hard. But teachers do really well in this business because they're used to working insane hours and dealing with crazy people and having to show up anyway. So there's actually some pretty good overlap there.
Yeah.
So when you were watching your dad get started in this, how did his stories change?
They just went up a level, right? They became more relatable, I think, because the stories with the kids, as I, of course, got older, this was an adult to a child. As his stories, it was the same thing. He still came home, sat and had his beer, told stories. I think they became more relatable, more real, because it was like adult to adult. They sort of like stepped up a level. And I think really is when it probably really formed. So now, meanwhile, my dad was he was 24, I think, when he had me. So picture, I was already starting to work, right? Like I was in my first professional job. And I think I know, and I didn't figure it out until I wrote my first book, that those stories, especially as they got more relatable, were the thing that was like my underpinning of why I saw his authenticity and the success I saw with him having it, because I could relate to, what he was doing and the success he was having.
Do you think that also contributed to the level of intimacy you have with him? Like how close you are? You want to hear more stories from dad?
Yeah, it's funny. I tell this all the time. My father and I mean, love him dearly, but I was a typical teenage pain in the ass. Many of our interactions were like him yelling at me getting pissed off, running up to my bedroom, taking the door, and knowing full well as soon as I slammed it that I was going to get yelled at to come back down. And I mean, we had a great relationship, but yeah, it turned around really when we could have a beer together. As weird as that sounds, I was just telling this story the other day because my daughter just got her license, and I was telling my husband, I felt like there was a little bit of that too. When she got her license, we were a little more equal and our relationship sort of evolved. So my closeness with my father first started, I think, when we had that beer together. But I think it's been really interesting, him watching me almost dissecting his success, because so much of what I taught, authenticity is my thing, and he is the root of it. I think he has fun now telling me those stories through that lens now, right? Being more sort of aware that his stories aren't just stories, like they're teaching you something, and authenticity is a big part of that.
And he probably also knows they're going to show up in a podcast, a book, or a presentation. And let's just be honest, Dad might want to hear his own stories come out of your mouth. I'm just going to guess.
Yes, he does not mind a little bit of a spotlight. Not at all.
I mean, who doesn't? Any teacher who lies about it we know it because you're in the center of their world. And it's the way that you handle that spotlight. And in real estate, we're the center of somebody's world for this moment. What do you do with that spotlight? And what do you do with the trust that comes from it?
Yeah. Yeah. And I never asked him this, but I wonder too if he sees, like, I think he's the kind of guy that easily could have been a professional speaker, could have been a business person. I'm not saying what I've done in business and as a speaker now and an author like is any better than what he did as a teacher and a real estate agent. But I would imagine he might also see a little bit of, I mean, this is super cliche. Of course, he sees me and him. I'm his daughter, but I'm sort of like carrying out what he could have done or what he really has helped propel, if that makes any sense. Like I'm a true extension of him, I think.
The through line, right?
Yeah, yeah.
His stories and his classroom and how he brought that home led to the next phase, and how he brought that home leads you into a widening of your own space.
Yeah.
And neither one's better than or worse than,
right.
just the through line.
That's right. Yep.
And that's what we all want, I think, with our kids. You want them to find their own space and be successful in what they choose, while you also celebrate them from back here, and you kind of hope they look back over their shoulder for a minute.
Yeah. And yes. And, I always tell people, and I'm in the thick of it, I've got a 13 and a 16-year-old, and I've always been a big picture thinker versus like worried about the micro. I've always been macro. And I'll often tell people, like when they're struggling with their kid or something, I said, you want to parent them in a way that you're really focusing on the things that they're going to say on a podcast when they turn 30. Right? You know what I mean? Like, when my son turns 30-ish, right? Let's say he's on a podcast and he's not going to talk about the times I took him to hockey practice. He's going to talk about the time I quit my corporate job to, go be an entrepreneur and a speaker, et cetera. He's going to talk about the books, which they don't give two shits about right now. But like, it's that show that demonstrate those bigger things that they don't appreciate or even recognize when they're younger that are really the most important. But it's hard as a parent because there's a not a short-term gratification to those things, right? At all. But that's essentially what you want.
This one podcast I listened to is Confessions of a Crappy Christian, and she's hilarious. Made a comment on the episode I was listening to yesterday morning that she wished she'd had a report card as a parent because she responds well to critique and what am I doing well and what am I doing poorly. And she told her husband, she's like, I don't get a report card in this job. And he's like, who's going to grade you? She's like, I know, but still. And it's what you're saying there. You want to, you want to be able to grow, and there's no way to gauge it. But I will say this about those days going to hockey practice. He's not going to care where you took him. He's going to absolutely remember all those conversations in the car.
Yeah.
And when he gets to 30, it's going to be, I can't believe that my mom, who wrote all these books, spent those conversational times with me in the car. It's going to connect those dots. I can see.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
Because my kids tell me I'm extra because they hate that I have books and they hate that I have a social media following. And I said, well, would you rather I be basic? And then they get mad that I use their language. And so I like to trigger my children. It's one of my special talents. But I haven't thought about the podcast angle. I've just always said I'm trying not to raise a flock of assholes.
Yeah, so that too.
That's a goal.
That's definitely a goal.
All right. So in my show, we love talking about people's experiences in real estate, and especially when it's the things that you would walk into a room and say, y'all are never going to believe this happened, because the world needs more good stories, and you were raised by good stories. So what real estate story has happened in your life, Miss Erin?
Yeah. So like I said, you said at the beginning, he's a serial storyteller. So as I was thinking about the podcast, this is probably my favorite if I think about crazy shit in real estate. So again, picture a very small town. It's it's probably about 1,000 people, but in the summer it's probably like 10,000. It's right on the lake, right? It's beautiful. So it's a very seasonal, a lot of seasonal property, there's 5 lakes in our town. So a lot of high value and have increased value properties and a big discrepancy between those. But anyway, I just want to set the landscape. None of that is probably super relevant to what I'm saying. I'll go a little bit. So he had a closing one day and he worked at Real Estate One at the time. And so he drove into town. And again, I also have to say, my parents both were born and raised in this town. They've been dating since they were in 8th and 9th grade. My dad's father was a teacher at the school. Like, to say they're from this area is a way understatement, right? So they have been there forever. Some of their friends that they have now are friends from elementary school. So he's driving
Falls. You're talking It's a Wonderful Life, Bedford Falls love. Oh, they're George and Mary. Minus the suicide attempt, but all that.
Yes. No suicide attempts. And my brother and sister-in-law have been dating since high school too, which is kind of crazy. Took me a little bit longer to find that guy. But so he's driving to a closing and he pulls into Real Estate One and he looks behind him and there's police lights. And he's like, oh, crap. So staying cool because he's from the town. And this is a white privilege story. So anybody listening that, is listening to this, yes, I recognize like white privilege says that you can be maybe a little bit looser. He comes up, he asks him, what was he driving? He said, maybe 45. He's not sure. And so the guy says, okay, so my dad knows he's going to take some time to write this up. Well, he's got this closing. He also knows the value of kind of having somebody on his home turf. And so he tells the policeman, he said, well, do you mind if I go inside, you work on the paperwork, and I'm second office on the right when you come in and just bring it to me? Again, this is Northern Michigan, white privilege. This is also 20 years ago, right? So the guy does the paperwork and comes in. And of course, my father says, wait, he noticed. He says, are you the new bicycle cop? And he says, yes, I am. And he's like, new to town, right? He said, yeah, I'm new. He said, you thinking about staying in the area, right? And so now I'm sure the cop is like, he's not stupid. He's like, okay, now this guy's going to try to are you kidding me? He's going to try to sell me something. He's a realtor, right? So my dad just has a conversation and he says, I'm renting, and, talks about his whole thing, doesn't pitch him or anything. He said about 3 days later, he goes back to the office, cop car behind him again. And he's like, oh, I know who that is. So the guy comes out and he says, hey, I got to tell you, I'm renting a place out on Lake Skegamaw and from a nice woman, but she's actually looking to sell it. And she's not really happy with her real estate agent. I told her about you. So my dad says, great, that's wonderful. So my dad gives this woman a call, gives her information. The woman starts to tell her situation. He said she was a very tough woman. She knew what she was going to stand. He went out, made an appointment, assessed it. Here's what I could list it at. And, she said, I'm not going any lower than that. I said, fine. But as he was looking at the house, he thought of his really good friend, Todd, an old teacher friend of his, still one of his very best friends. And Todd had been trying to get on the water. So he calls up Todd and he was like, hey, I've got a listing for you. Check it out. So long story short, Todd, his friend, ends up buying the house that he listed. My father sells Todd's house. My dad makes about $15,000, $18,000 in commission off of what should have been a speeding ticket all along. And so, that's just the kind of guy he was. And he always talks about, I was telling him I was coming on here and he goes, they used to, I knew he would do this. So of course he lit right up. He's like, we have to do these scripts. And I know you talked about this when you were doing some stuff and you hate it. And he's like, I hate it too. And then they tell you when you meet somebody, you're supposed to find out, what's the square footage of their house and what's, all the nits. And he goes, I always asked one simple question. What do you know about the area? That was always his opening question, especially in a town like that. It could be a local person. It could be somebody from Detroit area that knows nothing. But he said, usually there's some sort of tie. And as soon as you say, it's not who you know or why you buy, it's like, what do you know about the area? The stories would come out. Well, we used to come up here as a kid. Oh, who's your, and of course, if my dad was always 2 degrees of separation from, their father, their uncle, their friend, and he said, now you'd have a 15-minute conversation and they're like, not really thinking about real estate. They're like, but I think I could work with this guy. Right. And so, that was always his approach.
So if you're in real estate and you're listening to this podcast or watching it and thinking, man, I need some more Leigh Brown answers in my life. Well, guess what, friends? I have a new program that is launching right now called Answers.Real Estate, where I will give you every bit of insight I have to help you grow your real estate business, help you better respond to consumers, to provide a more excellent real estate experience so that the next time you land on crazy shit in real estate, you'll have a better solution to whatever you ran into. Answers.Real Estate. There are monthly plans available. You will love it. Get your coaching. Sign up with me today. Well, he's right. And frankly, that advice applies even to people who don't live in a market they grew up in. If you're not from that town and you're not deep, you can still say, well, what do you know about the area? Because you might learn something from them, but you also find out they're coming at it from a different space. Mm-hmm. And when you're in a second home or resort market, like a lake market, you have your year-rounders and they are their own community. Then you have your summer people. They're a different community. They don't always mingle really well, as evidenced by the Facebook pages that are started by the year-rounders in almost every market that get very grumpy about the summer people, but they need their money.
Yep.
Realizing that if you just get those relational questions asked, it's a game changer.
Yeah.
And frankly, wouldn't that be how we solve almost every problem we have in relationships, is to put aside all the things that we fight about and say, well, what do you know about the area? What do you know about this? What do you know about authenticity? What do you know about writing a book? And let somebody start talking.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, it's a powerful question.
Good job, Dad. But by the way, we're going to have to tell him this because I know he's watching and listening. Hey, Dad, when you said, what do you know about the area? That's a script.
But it came from his own brain. So if it came from his own brain, it's a damn good script.
I mean, let's be fair. You could have made a fortune in coaching, just like you could have made a fortune in public speaking and writing books. But, you let those trains go by, Dad. So I don't know what you're doing, but good job. I always love scripts. It's an argument that happens all the time of, I don't want to sound canned. Well, it's not that you sound canned, is that you know what to say. It's two different things.
Yeah.
It's no
Especially when it's a question. I mean, I think having planned questions that are thoughtful and then you have the patience to just shut up and listen. Like, I think that's fair game. That's different.
Well, but having prepared questions allows you to smooth over really awkward moments. So if you do hit an impasse with somebody, that's changing the subject, is what we used to call it.
Yeah, that's right.
I always like asking people when I would get a couple together, how'd y'all meet? People love telling her how we met. Mm-hmm. Although sometimes they start arguing. And now I'm thinking, I've got a dynamic here that's going to be fun and interesting. And we'll be listing this house within 3 years, so we'll be good. I mean,
just saying.
All right. So in your personal real estate life, like since you and Manny have decided to have a life and a family, get dunked in olive oil and live in Connecticut, what have y'all experienced in real estate? Do you buy and sell frequently? Are you the people who buy and stay put forever? What is your real estate personality?
I would say my real estate personality, ours is really grateful. Real estate has done so much for us and we haven't done a lot. And what I mean by that, so when my husband and I, when Manny and I, we had been dating about a year and we were ready to move in together. I had just laughed because he hadn't even told me he loved me yet, but he came from like trauma, divorced parents, whatever. It took a while. It took us getting our first dog. And then I think he finally uttered the words. So he was like, I am not living in a white walled apartment though. He had been renting a house with his friends. I had been in a white walled apartment. And so it was his idea to go out looking for a house. I mean, we were 26 or 27, not married, not even, only one of us had told us, the other that they had loved each other, i.e. me. But we did. We went out and we looked. This was in 2001. And we ended up buying a starter home. And at the time, it was, I still laugh about it. I'll never forget. We were looking at this house and then we went to look at another one. We really liked it. We liked it more, but it was $185,000. And our budget was $175,000, which is so funny, right? It's like so crazy to think about. We're like, we couldn't possibly do that. But we did. We bought the house. We bought it for 100 and actually, I think it was 169, so $170,000. We lived there for 4 years, and appreciated $100,000, right? Because we went from 2001 to 2005, which was a good time. And then our second experience was quite unique. And this is probably, I don't know if it's a good lesson, whatever. I'll tell the story anyway. We were interested in a piece of property that was beautiful. It was gorgeous. Had like 17 acres of land. Long story short, yeah, it was at the end of a cul-de-sac of a gorgeous neighborhood. Well, we couldn't meet on price. They wanted something ridiculous, which, by the way, we learned 4 years later, they sold it for under what we had offered, but that's a whole nother story. But it got us looking. And so we started working with a different realtor, and we mostly went to look at houses because we thought, oh, if we're going to build, we need to get some other ideas of what we like and what we don't like. And so we went and we saw probably, I don't know, 8, 10 houses. And then one day we get a call from her, and, she's obviously got a better feel for what we're looking for. And she said, I have a house. It's not on the market, but I think it's just what you want. We're like, huh? Tell us more. And so this house that we're in, our dream home, had been appraised the year before. They knew the situation. That was an older couple. They had 0 kids. This is a 4-bedroom, 3,500 square foot house or whatever. I think one of them had just recently had sort of trouble with their knee. So long story short, they knew they were interested, but they never put it on the market. So she reached out to them, and they said, yeah, come look at it. And we came to look at it. And the craziest part was then we said, well, we love it. How much? Right. And she went back, and they basically offered the same amount that had been praised at the year before, which was a big freaking deal because this was now in 2005. The market was still like, soaring. So it was a great experience in that, it was like a no-brainer. We bought the house, and then we took a leap about 6, 7 years later, and we had our first child. We were trying to have our second. We're having tons of issues. And we just started talking about maybe having a second home. To be honest with you, I don't think I've ever told anybody this, Leigh. Part of it was prompted. I was sitting, I know you're going to love this one. My daughter was in dance for like a couple of years. Oh. And I was sitting in like the dance waiting room, and a couple of the moms were talking about their ski houses. And I was like, well, they have a ski house or ski condo. And I'm not a one-upper. I am not pretentious, like, by any means. It was more of a like permission.
Wait, they can do that? Wait,
yeah,
what?
Yeah. Like it's a real. So we decided to go look at around a mountain that I had never been to. We'd skied a lot, before that. We got super freaking lucky. Our realtor took us to 5 houses. The first one we saw had been on the market for 9 years. 9 months. 9 days.
Okay.
It's exactly what we were looking for. Was it within our budget? And it was the best freaking thing we ever did. And now we own a house that's, I'm sure, more than doubled in price, right? We bought that in 2013, I think it was. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's more than doubled. And more importantly, we'll never leave it. It doesn't matter what the value is. It's given us sort of, endless memories. Our good friends bought the house across the street. So we have like a commune up there almost. Every time we're up there, we're sort of in between each other's houses. And so when long story short, like when I think about real estate and what it's done so much for us. It's, because we got ahead of the curve, financially, it just allowed us to do things that other people couldn't do with the equity that we built. And then I'd say the final like real estate story. Sorry, you're probably like, this is a bunch of shit that we don't need to hear. But to me, it's what I think about when I think about real estate. So a couple of years ago, my father-in-law passed away, and it was a big loss. And my husband doesn't have any siblings, but he's very close with his cousins, typical Greek family. And his next in line cousin was really close with his father. Well, her and her husband had been looking for a new home for almost a year. And they looked in our area. They originally lived about half an hour from here. They looked in our area and several other areas. And it was Greek Easter. And they were over at our house. And the house across the street had come on the market, similar to our situation, like 6 months earlier. And come on and come off really quick. Wasn't listed through anybody. I think it was for sale by owner. And we were sitting here. Billy had some drinks. Nicole, my podcast co-host, was egging him on. She said, you should just go over there. Go over there. Bring him some spanakopita. Bring him some grape leaves and go ask. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, maybe you guys don't want to hear this. It's not like it's not the typical realtor, but he went over. Doesn't hurt to ask. The wife was there. She said, I want to sell, but my husband doesn't. He said, okay, here's my number. 10 minutes later, she called because her husband was down in Florida and said, we're willing to sell the house. And now our cousins live across the street. You're like extended family. The kids are closer than they've ever been. And so we're really blessed. So like, as I think about you guys, realtors and what they do, those are the moments, right? Those are the times when you just ask, like my dad's story, like you just happen to think of your friend when you think about like our realtor did, knowing what we wanted and making those calls. Like, I think so many people think it's the transactions, it's the commissions, it's the listings, it's the marketing. I feel like our experience it's been about the foresight, the love, the relationships, the luck, that's brought us across the street from our cousins, across the street from our friends, to these homes, to these opportunities that we wouldn't have had if somebody didn't just sort of think outside the transaction.
Oh, think outside the transaction. That's a good phrase. But I'm sitting here thinking, and on behalf of all the realtors who are watching and listening to this episode, they would absolutely celebrate that Billy went across the street and made that connection happen, because the lifers in this business want nothing more than for people to get what they want through real estate, which is also told in your other stories of the agent who knew about a house. And so her relationships paid off. Yeah. And who jumped around to find you the ski property that would work so that you would get what you want. And I got to say to any of y'all who are listening, you're thinking, but I don't own a vacation property. I don't own anything yet. I'm still trying to figure it out. You figure something out, because there's never a perfect time to buy. The markets are never perfect. Interest rates are never perfect. You figure out your budget, you figure it out, and then you hang on to it. And then several years later, it might take a minute, but that's the beauty of real estate. It's definitely a long-term proposition, but you look back at that ski property. We bought our first beach house in 2015. 2012. We bought it in 2012. We didn't think we could afford it. Right. We said, let's give it a shot. And it's turned out to be our best performing rental property, but it's also where our kids want to go with us to unplug and hang out. And that's all I want, is that time together. And that's where real estate is unique, because you get memories and you get the investment. Yeah. And all you have to do is have a little faith that it's going to work out, because you do have to have some faith, and you also have to turn off the markets when things go cattywampus, because they're going to go wild in 25 and 26. And we know this, it's going to be bumpy. So you make your numbers work and you don't look outside of that, kind of like your kids and your family. Your family might go wild. Your kids might go wild. Look at that. Don't look around here. You're not trying to compare to Instagram. Focus, focus, focus. And then you can be like Dad, and you took care of your town, took care of your students, and it turns into a real estate business. And you can be like you, where you take care of your family and you take care of the relationships, and then the real estate's just a part of that story too.
Yeah, I love that. And the thing that it makes me think of as I'm sort of telling these random stories and hearing you sort of bring the wisdom to them, I think of my friend Erin Baker, and they teach this concept in their book Joyful AF. That's not about planting seeds. It's about planting magic beans. And the reason it's not about seeds, because seeds, you know what you're planting, right? You know, when you put that seed in the ground, you know it's going to grow up. But magic beans, you don't know, right? And if I think about my father's story, and he also told another story where he had this really terrible listing. It was on the water, but not. You couldn't build on the water. You had to build across the street. The property wasn't great. And even my mom was like, why are you like wasting your time? Like, nobody's going to buy that. And he tells the story about how a guy came to see it, and that he's like, well, I don't think we're ready yet. And he said, well, why don't you, invest in something in town, and then you'll have that, why wait the 8 years? And he wasn't salesy. He was just trying to think of like creative magic beans to plant. And, he tells the story about that one where he sold him that, and then and it turned into probably $20,000-$30,000 worth of deals because it was one after the other. And if I go back to what I'm obsessed with, which is authenticity and just getting away from the transaction and being superhuman and vulnerable and asking those questions and connecting and building that trust and doing things that don't necessarily make sense maybe on paper short term, but you're planting these magic beans. And you never know where these families are going to go. And I'm sure you have a million stories of, kids growing up and coming. And I think that's a little bit of what life is all about and why you keep moving even when things are hard and the market's hard. It's but you're planting magic beans and you don't know where they're going to grow or what they're going to grow into, but they will grow. So.
Well, it looks like it turns out that authenticity and real estate are a very parallel pathway, because there may not be an immediate payoff to being true to yourself. And there's very seldom an immediate payoff in real estate. But over the long haul, there is a return that's generated, whether it's in peace of mind for knowing that you did the right thing and stay true to yourself, or it's for taking care of people. And I tell young people this all the time. I'm like, if you do people right, the money will find you. And the same thing happens when you're true to yourself. If you figure out your core values, which you should do that before you try to be authentic, get your foundation built. You can do anything to that house you want to once you got a good foundation. You can take 2 stories, 3 stories, stay in a rancher. Who cares? You get to choose if the foundation is solid, just like real estate. So here we are in our parallel pathway.
Beautiful.
Erin
Brilliant.
Wants to reach out to you, buy your books, hire you for an engagement to have you come talk to their people about building that foundation of who they are. How do they best find you?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to find static Erin, beauthenticinc.com, just the letter B, authenticinc.com. That has my book, a link to my podcast, because the work doesn't have to suck, which Leigh is going to be on, freebies, etc. If you want to interact, either LinkedIn or Instagram. So if you can spell my name, you can find me at Erin Hatzikostas.
Is that the barrier to entry? Is if you can spell my name, you can interact with me. That's hilariously awesome. And I love that more than I should.
Well, I always say, I had to take this hard name, which really sucked until I went into the personal branding space. And it was awesome because I am literally the only Erin Hatzikostas in the world, or at least on the internet. So that's what I say. So if you can spell it, you can find me.
That's awesome. I'm just going to tell you, this is the most painful time of year to be Leigh Brown, because if you did not know it, that god-awful Christmas movie, A Christmas Story, the person who wrote the script named Leigh Brown.
Oh, boy.
So every year, Google is blown up with that movie. And it's not even a good movie. And
does it kill your SEO?
Y'all can fight me over this. It does kill my SEO. There was an Australian rugby player who was top drawer Australian rugby, in the fantasy leagues. Luckily, he's retired now, so I no longer have to fight with him on Google. But that stupid movie every year. So
hilarious.
I Elf as much as I can. I say, go Elf, no more Christmas Story, fight it, fight the power. Erin, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's such a pleasure to have you. And I'm so excited to come hang out on your podcast, and we'll continue talking about fun things.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, and happy holidays.
All right, guys, all of Erin's contact information in the show notes for this episode. Say something nice in the comments below before you leave. Hit the bell to subscribe, and we'll see you next time. By the way, friends, don't miss my brand new coaching program at answers.realestate, where you can have access to Leigh Brown, submit your questions, have them answered, meet like-minded professionals, have an entire library to help you build your business no matter what happens in the market. Get signed up today. I promise you'll be glad you did. So if you found value in this episode, please like and subscribe to this channel, turn on the bell, and catch another amazing episode by clicking above. Crazy Shit in Real Estate is also available in all of your normal podcast apps. So if that's where you like to hang out, go find me, click subscribe, and most importantly, leave me a review that says you think I'm awesome, my guests are awesome, or this content is just exactly what you were looking for. And then, by the way, if there's something you need, you want to learn about something, you can comment below anytime. You can also send me a direct message if you need to remain anonymous. No judgment. But anyway, I'll only judge if you forget to subscribe and click. I'll see you next time.